I think that's the signal that we're going to start. So, thank you very much for coming out at this difficult hour. Everybody is probably headed for dinner, but I want to try to give you a snapshot of one of the most fascinating dance traditions in the world. And this is the Kandyan Dance tradition in Sri Lanka. Undoubtedly, if you go ashore in Sri Lanka, and we'll be there for 2 days, you're going to see some Kandyan dancers. And it's tempting just to look at these dancers and say, oh my, this is really very artistic and very engaging. But you need to understand that this is a tradition that is really steeped very deeply in ritual. And it has a very deep religious meaning. And the religious meaning and the national cultural meaning fused in this Kandyan dance tradition become one of the most important ways of understanding Sri Lankan society altogether. So if we take a look at the heritage of the Kandyan dance tradition, we find that this is one of the most sacred and most artistic of all Sri Lankan traditions, and it's become very, very closely identified with Sri Lankan national identity. And this is one of the reasons why you see Kandyan dancing being done everywhere in Sri Lanka. Every time there's an official event, an official performance, even a soccer match, you'll find the Kandyan dancers out on the soccer field. But the understanding that a tradition like this, as I've said in my previous lectures, helps us to understand the nature of the culture of the people who have engendered this. It is a snapshot of their history. It's a snapshot of their religious values. It's a snapshot of their cultural values and their social relations. All of this can be seen in a performance tradition like this. And when you see a performance tradition of this depth in a society, you really have a key to this kind of deeper understanding of the society. So I'm going to try to give you a picture of how this takes place within Sri Lankan society and within the Kandyan dance tradition. Now, the dance can be seen as a visual prayer, which is important. You look at it and you see the artistic quality of the dance, but the devotional quality of it is also very important. The reason it's called Kandyan dance is because it originates in the historic capital of Kandy, which is in the central highlands of Sri Lanka. We're going to be docking in Colombo, and that's here. But Kandy is here in the central highlands of Sri Lanka, right in the heart of the country. The important thing for us to understand is that this is a Buddhist tradition. Now we've been seeing Buddhist traditions in Thailand, Muslim traditions in Malaysia, Hindu traditions in Bali, and also in Java or in Indonesia. But this is a Buddhist tradition, but it's not just a Buddhist tradition, because Sri Lanka has a very interesting and very complex religious history. Sri Lanka has an animistic religious tradition that predates Buddhism, which came to Sri Lanka about 300 BCE, 300 before the Common Era. And when Buddhism arrived in Sri Lanka, there were already these deities and belief systems that existed within Sri Lanka. Gradually, these previous belief systems got assimilated into Buddhism. And they are assimilated into this tradition as well. So we see the pre-Buddhist traditions reflected in the dance tradition of Kandyan dance. There were animistic ceremonies that honored the deities and the ancestors. And these were transformed under the Kandyan royal tradition, the Kandyan court tradition. So, in the Kandyan tradition, you have every gesture that's dedicated to Buddha, but also to deities. Now, the interesting thing about these deities is that they are the pre-Buddhistic spirits and gods that have been now subsumed under Buddhism. They are subordinate to the Buddha, who is the principal source of enlightenment, but they also help human beings. And these deities and also some evil spirits exist within the framework of the Sri Lankan Buddhist tradition. So the rhythm of the dance is a way of addressing and invoking these spirits. And the basic Kandyan dance tradition, the sacred tradition, is actually a healing ceremony, which I'll talk about a little bit later. So here's an example of Kandyan dance, something that you will see. It's very beautiful and very aesthetic, coordinated movements, and very complex, both footwork and handwork. So these pre-Buddhist beliefs involved the worship of the yakshas, or spirits, and the devas, or guardian gods. Now the word deva comes down to us when we talk about opera, for instance. We talk about an opera diva. It means a god. And the devas came to Sri Lanka both through Hindu influence and also through these pre-Buddhist belief systems. But it's the yakshas that are really the yakhas or the yakshas that are really interesting, at least for me, because these are spirits that inhabit human bodies and that also create mischief in the world. And the devas are the good, pure spirits that guide people in their beliefs and guide people in their behavior. And so this pre-Buddhist system is what is largely addressed in the Kandyan dance form. There were ritual devil dances, the yakshas being devils or devs in Islamic terms, that provide healing and protection, and the devils, the devs, the yakshas, are those that produce the infirmities and produce disease and also mental disorders in human beings who have to be propitiated and have to be addressed. So masks were common, and fire was also common in these ceremonies. So the Buddhism then reinterpreted, as I said, these ritual trance-making experiences and these dance forms, and incorporated them into the Buddhist belief system. What we find is that in the Buddhist system, these are merged with the Jataka tales. Jataka tales are oftentimes seen as kind of children's fairy tales, but they're really quite serious in purpose because they detail the previous lives of the Buddha in the reincarnation system. And the previous lives of the Buddha involved the Buddha being reincarnated as various animals who are able to be wise and to speak and to also engage in moral interactions with each other. A little bit like Aesop's fables. So Jataka tales get incorporated into the traditional pre-Buddhist system, and in that way you end up with a very interesting and very hybrid system of things. So spiritual purification for individuals, that is ridding themselves of disease, ridding themselves of disorders and unhappiness, was achieved through art and through discipline, and this is the basis for the Kandyan dance system. During the the Kandyan kingdom era, 13th, 14th, 15th century, we find royal patronage refining this dance structure and its technique. So the dancers performed at the palace and also in temple rituals, and they enjoyed royal patronage. And this was the era where these dance forms became highly refined and highly trained, and they became more than just a village ritual, a healing ceremony. They became high art. So there was a formal link then between the monarchy and religion. The monarchy in the court system then became associated with purity, with good behavior, with healing, and with general welfare. And the Kandyan dance system became one of the vehicles whereby royalty was able to project this kind of feeling toward the population as a whole. Now, during the colonial period, we have the European powers coming to Sri Lanka, India, and other places. And of course they brought with them their own religious beliefs, and they saw the religious beliefs of many of the peoples whom they colonized as being not Christian, to be honest with you. And as a result, they tried to repress many of the traditions that were carried out in places like Sri Lanka, including the Kandyan dance tradition. So the colonial period was a period where there was a lot of repression, but the dance was continued to be practiced in the highlands, in the uplands, and this became a form of cultural resistance to the European powers in Sri Lanka. The dance then was a symbol of resistance and also a preservation of these cultural values. So after independence, after Sri Lanka was made independent, there was an explosion of revival of the Kandyan dance tradition. So post-1948, we find an amazing expansion of both training and practice of Kandyan dance. And now to the present day, we find it's ubiquitous throughout Sri Lanka. It is facing some challenges because there are artistic challenges and there are institutional challenges. But it is a resurgence of traditional art, and that becomes very important. The Sri Lankan government established state training institutes so that young people could learn this dance tradition, and also it was introduced into the schools, also into colleges and universities, and became much more widespread. And it came down from the highlands and is now in Colombo and other places throughout the entire country. So the cultural identity of Sri Lanka then became associated with this artistic tradition, and it was solidified. It helped that UNESCO recognized Kandyan dance as an intangible cultural heritage in 2010. And this provided international recognition for this dance form, and also a great deal of national pride in the fact that it was receiving this international recognition. So this validated the global importance of the Kandyan tradition for Sri Lankans themselves and also for visitors like us. And it's important that we understand that that's something that is greatly valued in Sri Lanka. And it also encouraged documentation, study, and protection for the form. The religious symbolism of the Kandyan dance tradition is very intense and very deep. Just to give you a few of the little features, the white costume indicates purity and discipline. And of great importance is this feature here. This is the Ves headdress. And the Ves headdress is more than just a hat. It is something that is considered sacred, and it gives power to the dancers. So when a person puts on this Ves headdress, they are invoking sacred power in order to be able to carry out their dance activities with great skill and with great spiritual inspiration. There are ornaments, and these ornaments, each ornament has a specific purpose, and it also repels negativity, and it enhances the vibration of the dancers, who actually make sounds when they are dancing. So the idea of this revival as a symbol of Sri Lanka's independence and national identity is very important. If you ever get a Sri Lankan 100 rupee bill, you'll see the Kandyan dancers on the bill itself. So they're that important in terms of the national identity. So this represents this continuity of Sinhalese heritage, and it is quite unique. So I'm going to show you a public performance, and then I'll talk about it. This is a public performance that is the this is the public performance of the sacred procession honoring the relic of the tooth of the Buddha. And in this procession, we have all of the various forms of Kandyan dance represented in the procession. So it becomes something that is seen as a national celebration that really celebrates this art as well. Now it's called the Esala Perahera Festival, the festival of the celebration and veneration of the sacred tooth of the Buddha. Those of you who have studied the history of Christianity, you know that relics are very important in religion. So we have so many pieces of the true cross around the world that you could build an entire city from those individual pieces. So the sacred tooth of the Buddha is one of these things that is a real touchstone for Sri Lankan society and a solidification of its Buddhist identity. And a replica of the tooth of the Buddha, the sacred tooth of the Buddha, is carried in the procession, and the dancing and music that's carried out is a way of celebrating that, and also addressing the Buddha and addressing all of the subordinate gods in order to bring peace, prosperity, also rain, and other success to the culture and to its economy. So it is a 10-day procession which honors the Buddha's tooth relic. So there are dancers, drummers, and elephants that parade nightly. It's a little bit like Mardi Gras, in that we have these processions for 10 days running. Unfortunately, we're not going to be in Sri Lanka at the time when this takes place. There are prayers for rain, for peace, and prosperity. The Kandyan Dance then has spread because it's such an important national symbol. It is performed at weddings, at harvests, at temple ceremonies, and as I mentioned to you, also on the soccer field and on the cricket field when you have these public sports events. So it has really become something that is trotted out at almost every occurrence because it does have such deep cultural meaning for people in Sri Lanka. It brings the communities together through celebration. Now, it's also performed for visitors, and I don't know, but I would guess that when we dock in Colombo, there may even be Kandyan dancers on the at the harbor where we disembark from the ship. Now, one of the important points, I've talked to you a little bit about the fact that there's purification through discipline, through physical discipline, and through control of one's body. And the purification of art that takes place also has to do with athleticism. So there is an athletic essence to this. It shows balance, grace, and the ability to also do things like jump and leap in an athletic manner. And we'll talk about Sri Lankan martial arts in just a minute, because that has also informed this art form. So these leaps and spins convey joy and strength. And the dance is used for storytelling. And oftentimes these athletic movements help to illustrate the stories that are actually taking place. Now, the costumes, as I mentioned to you before, have tremendous meaning in the execution of the Kandyan dance tradition. These beaded jackets and rhythmic ankle bells and the beaded jackets are absolutely essential. They have symbolic power and spiritual power as well as being decorative. The silver chest plate is of particular importance here. It acts as a protection and a kind of talisman for the dancer. There are 64 elements to the vest dance, which is the most common of the Kandyan dance traditions. 64 different elements to the costume, and each element has a specific spiritual and cultural meaning. Without all 64 elements, the dancer is not properly dressed, not properly clothed. And the materials, the costume materials, are usually kept in a sacred space where the dancer then can actually clothe themselves in the correct costume with the correct spiritual ceremonies that they undergo when they are actually dressing themselves for the performance. So the costume design also mirrors the motifs that you find on Buddhist temples throughout Sri Lanka. So in some ways, the dancer with their costumes is an enshrinement of actual Buddhist faith as represented in the temples and temple symbolism. So all of these things come together in a single complex form. The dance is accompanied by drums. And this is the Geta Baraya drum, which provides a very deep rhythmic foundation. It is unique to Sri Lanka, and you won't find this drum anyplace else. But it is essential for the actual performance of Kandyan dance. Then there are two other drums, the tamatama and the horowana, which enrich the texture of the drumming sequence. The rhythm dictates energy and emotion, But it has another function as well. And that is that when we have drumming in an incessant way, it actually induces trance. And one of the important aspects of traditional Kandyan dance is that the performers actually enter into a form of trance. And in the original healing ceremonies that we found in Kandyan dance, there is a priest, and the priest must go into trance in order to be able to address the spirit world to allow healing to take place. And it's drumming and rhythmic movements of the body that actually help to induce this trance state. This is something that is quite different from other traditions that we find in Southeast Asia, certainly. However, there are trance dance ceremonies that take place in India and in other places further to the west. Now, I mentioned to you that athleticism was really important. And this is the Gurukula tradition in Sri Lanka, which is a native Sri Lankan martial art. There are a few places that teach it in the United States, and I think there are a couple of studios in Europe. It is a very rigorous very rigorous athletic tradition, which involves leaping and quite a great deal of vigorous movement in the construction of fight routines. So in the Gurukula tradition, you have an apprenticeship under a master, under a guru. So the Guru Kula, guru being the master. And the focus centers on discipline, on ritual purity, and also respect. So it isn't just athleticism, it's also a personal dedication to a pure life. And getting a pure life through these athletic exercises is one of the goals of entering into this kind of martial art. Today, it is also taught in academic institutions. And so if you go to a university or even a high school in Sri Lanka, you'll find that the Gurukula tradition is being promulgated among young people as well. And although this particular illustration shows young men, it's also been being practiced by women in modern times. Now, one of the important aspects of this has to do with posture. The posture in Kandyan dance is especially important. A straight spine and bent knees show grace and strength. But one of the fascinating features that we find in Kandyan dance and also some Indian dance tradition are mudras. Mudras are hand forms, a little bit like American Sign Language for the deaf community. The mudras have specific meanings, and when the dancers are dancing, the mudras that they use actually tell a story. And if you know how to interpret the mudras, you can follow a story that's being presented in the actual dance. And so here are some mudras. You can see these particular hand gestures, and each one of them has a specific interpretable meaning in the context of the dance itself. So you're working with your feet, you're working with your body posture, you're working with athleticism, and then you also are interpreting what you're doing with these mudras, with these hand gestures. Very complex kind of artistic expression. And the movement forms a kind of spiritual geometry, which is, I think, one of the most important parts of talking about this. Now, there are a series of sequences in Kandyan dance that are based on animal movements. There are 18 classic sequences. I'm not going to go through all 18, but they imitate nature. And here are some of them: the Mayura, the peacock, the Gajara, which is the elephant, and the Naga, which is the serpent. And the people who are learning Kandyan dance learn these 18 classic sequences, a little bit like in the West that ballet dancers learn different forms for ballet. They learn a jeté, they learn a pirouette, and they learn the basic vocabulary of the dance tradition, much like any other dance tradition that we can think of in the world. But these are based on these animal movements, and they reflect the Jataka, the animal tales that are reflective of the previous incarnations of the Buddha. So everything feeds on itself in terms of the spiritual interpretation of what's actually going on. So these movements unite this animal symbolism with human rhythm. So beginning in childhood now, in order to be able to be a competent dancer, you really have to start very young. And part of the reason is because the body has to be trained to be flexible and strong from an extremely young age. So children as young as 4 or 5 years old are already starting to learn a lot of the movements and a lot of the discipline in developing themselves as Kandyan dancers. So physical training then is also paired with emotional discipline. So the idea that you have a physical body that's being trained, but you're also training in religious values and morality becomes an important part of a comprehensive training course for young people. So humility, patience, and perseverance are all part of the training process. And in order to learn as complex an artistic form as this, you really do have to start very young and be quite serious about your training. So these are the major forms of Kandyan dance. The Ves is the premier form. It's one that is the primary one that you'll see. This is a male initiation dance. It is highly sacred. Then the Panteru, which is the tambourine form that is often performed by women, and there are others, the Nayandi, the temple procession dance, and here's an example of the Ves dance. Then here's an example of the Panteru dance with the, as you can see, with the hoops, the kind of tambourines here. I mentioned to you earlier that the original Kandyan dance tradition was a healing ritual, and it remains today. Pardon me. It remains today in the form of the Kohomba Kankaria ritual. This is based on a legend, and to give you the outlines, there was a prince, and his mother-in-law resented the fact that he had ascended to the throne. And placed a curse on him, which made him very ill, and he was unable to be healed. A healer came from India in order to heal him, and the healer then delegated the health of the prince to a courtier who was named Kohomba. And Kohomba, over many, many centuries, became a god. And so Kohomba is now the healing god that preserves health not only for that prince in the legend, but also for anybody who's able to invoke his power. So the Kohomba Kankaria, and Kankaria just means ceremony, so the Kohomba Kankaria ritual is an all-night ceremony that is focused on healing. And it invokes the deity Kohomba, but it also blends chant, music, and dance in a situation where the priest eventually goes into trance and addresses the yakas or the yakshas, the evil spirits that are causing the disease or the disorder. The other gods, the beneficent gods, then are also invoked in order to bring healing, peace, and calm to the entire ceremony. So all of these dances take place over an entire night, a 24-hour period, and this is a ritual of purification and protection. Now, the dances themselves have now been abstracted from this original ceremony in order to create an artistic staged tradition that is, as I pointed out, has become emblematic of Sri Lankan culture and is used so widely elsewhere. The connection with the martial arts is continual, so that the Kandyan Dance shares these traits with Sri Lankan martial arts, and the spins and the jumps and the postures and agility are an important part of it. One of the reasons for this is that in dealing with the evil spirits, one wants to try to distract them or trick them, and so this posturing, this jumping, this agility is one of the ways that dancers are able to actually accomplish this. And this shows the relationship between the warrior-priest discipline that takes place throughout the traditional ceremony. So here is an Agampura martial art inspired dance. So we have had a modernization of Kandyan dance. It was largely male, and now it's now practiced by both males and females. Particularly the best dance was usually male exclusive, but now it's practiced by women as well. And in the 20th century, you get training in all of these traditions by both males and females. Now, there have been a whole series of modern innovations for Kandyan dance. There's been a fusion with other dance forms, with ballet, with contemporary dance, and also with digital media. So staging of Kandyan dance can be found in very elaborate theatrical productions with the influence of other dance traditions as it modernizes. So stage lighting and costumes are experiments that are being seen all the time when we see this dance form. And this shows, and as I've tried to point out with these other dance traditions, this shows actually cultural progress. It is a snapshot not only of the past in a kind of a museum sense, but it also shows cultural progress as people assimilate new ideas, new artistic forms, and also new sensibilities and identifications within their cultural tradition. So here's an example of a fusion dance. This is a dance that is based on Kandyan traditions, but also embodies new dance forms and new inspirations from other sources. So there are a lot of contemporary challenges to preserving this form. After the explosion of support for Kandyan dance after independence, after 1948, we come down to the present day and we find that there are challenges to trying to preserve this dance form. There's a declining number of apprentices. For one thing, it's very, very long. It's a very long process to try to develop a dancer with any skill, and they really do have to start from childhood. So developing the interest in having this long training process is something that is a challenge in today's world. I mean, people have iPhones and they want to do computer games, and there are other things that that distract them. So developing the inspiration for this in young people is really important. You can't start this when you're 40. It really is just too late. So getting young people involved at a very early age is one of the real challenges. Now, the other problem is that the tourism and commercialization, as nice as it is for visitors like us, it gets the tradition away from its original roots, from its spiritual roots, and from its roots as a healing ceremony, and as a ritual process. And for many people who are deeply religious, this is a problem. It's a secularization of a tradition that really does have very, very deep spiritual meaning. So that dimension, that is secular versus sacred, is another difficulty that we have with dealing with Kandyan dance traditions. And the modernization of Kandyan dance alters the traditional contexts. So temple ceremonies and the things that are performed actually in Kandy, in the historical capital of Sri Lanka, are on the decline, and more commercial productions in places like Colombo, where there's more financial support, to be honest with you, is one of the real tensions that we have in trying to make sure that this tradition continues. But there are preservation efforts that comes from the Ministry of Culture and in universities and high schools. Also documentation for and regional training centers have also arisen to try to preserve and continue the tradition today. UNESCO-backed safeguarding, UNESCO-backed support also safeguards these projects, and that is very important because it provides some financial support and also international recognition. So the tourist performances sustain rural livelihoods, and that's why you probably will see some while you're in Sri Lanka. And cultural diplomacy through these festivals, also sending Kandyan dancers abroad to international festivals. They've appeared in Europe, they've appeared in the United States, and they've appeared in other places abroad in Pan-Asian festivals. This also helps bring recognition and prestige to the performers. So balancing this authenticity with audience appeal is really a challenge. So dance is incorporated into the national curriculum of all schools, and somehow I have lost my dance is incorporated into the I'm very sorry. There we go. Dance has been incorporated into the curriculum of schools. There are degrees that can be obtained and scholarship has increased studying this form, as we are doing in this lecture today. So social media is also an important source of outreach. You can find examples of Kandyan Dance on YouTube and on other social media. So finally, the Kandyan Dance is a bridge between religion, art, and national identity. And that is, I think, one of the most important messages that we have in trying to understand a tradition like this. It is not just, attractive people making pretty movements on stage with music. There's a much deeper meaning that is going on here. And understanding that deeper meaning is a key to, again, trying to understand what it is to be Sri Lankan, what it is to have Sri Lankan identity. And the Sri Lankan person will know instantly when you're talking about Kandyan Dance, and there's a great deal of national pride that's involved with this. So it preserves Sri Lankan spirituality and also Sri Lankan identity, and becomes one of the most important touchstones for our cultural experience of Sri Lanka when we're there. So I wanted to give this lecture because I didn't want you to miss out on this particular dimension of Sri Lankan culture and art. And this is unfortunately my last lecture. I'm sorry to be leaving you myself in Colombo, where I'm going to try to find some Kandyan Dance performances. But I want to thank you for being here, and I'd like to thank our technical crew for solving all of our technical problems. So thank you very much. Have a lovely evening, and I hope that you will enjoy your time when we do arrive in Sri Lanka.